Well, good evening to everybody. How are you doing? Is everybody doing well? Okay. I am going to be very presumptuous, and would there be any chance, ma'am, would you be willing to move to the center a little bit? Would that be okay? You seem so far away. And then we kind of have everybody a little bit closer together. So we are going to take, we've got 2 hours. Is that what we have? 2 hours? Okay, 2 hours. It's not very much time, okay, in a lifetime, right? In a lifetime. And this is a big subject, and it's a lifetime subject. And so we're going to take about 2 minutes, and we're going to kind of bat the ball into your court a little bit and just have some of you tell me why you're here tonight specifically. Would any of you be willing to do that? Tell me why you're here tonight specifically. Yes. Or we can wait. Whenever you're ready.
My grandson, I'm raising my 7-year-old grandson.
Okay.
And last year he had straight A's and B's. This year he got an F in spelling.
Okay.
He can't really read or write properly.
Okay.
He struggles with it. Really.
Okay. All right. So a 7-year-old grandson doing well last year, struggling this year.
Well, he was having problems reading last year, but they thought it would get better.
Okay. All right. That's an age-old story. Thought it would get better. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, I had one of my high school, my kids, mild dyslexia. Didn't have to really totally do any intervention, but I now am teaching at a Christian school here in town.
Mm-hmm.
And several of my students have dyslexia.
Okay.
And we have, as opposed to public schools where they have the IEP, we do have some. We're trying to include some intervention. We have a tutor that comes in, but just here to find out how I can help my students
Okay.
best. And I'm not a reading teacher, I'm a science teacher.
Right.
It goes across the board, so how to handle and adjust my plans to help them to succeed.
Okay.
And not have to focus on battling the reading portion of it.
Okay. All right. So teacher here in town, Christian school, high school teacher?
Middle school, high school.
Middle school, high school teacher, struggling students. Okay. And how do we help? Okay. Yes.
I think I'm not at all knowledgeable.
Uh-huh.
Like I have maybe, like if I hear the word dyslexia, I think of like letters backwards.
Okay.
It's about where my knowledge of it.
Okay.
So I'm sure it's much more complex than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to learn.
Okay, good, very good. So we need a broader knowledge of what dyslexia is and learning about dyslexia. Do you have a dyslexic person in your life, or do you think you might?
Maybe.
Okay, potentially. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
My son, we just thought he had ADD, but we found out it was dyslexia.
Okay.
And we didn't really even know until 8th grade, basically.
Yep.
So then we got him diagnosed here in the Springs and went with the 504, and that's what they helped him out.
Okay. All right. So 504 has helped. 8th grade son?
He was 8th grade. He just graduated and is attending Pike Street College, but now I'm kind of thinking it might be my other son.
Okay. All right.
At 8th grade, I'm not quite sure.
Okay. All right. Very good. Anybody else like to share? Yes. Go ahead.
I have a 13-year-old dyslexic daughter.
Okay.
We're only at level 3 on Barton.
Okay.
But we're getting there, and we're just grateful now that we are through spelling tests.
Okay.
But definitely have a lot of struggles. She was born to a meth mom, so she has a lot of other issues as
Okay.
well. And this is just compounded on top of those.
Okay. So a 13-year-old adopted daughter who is struggling. Okay. All right. Yes.
I saw my brother, my family has a history of dyslexia.
Uh-huh.
My brother had extreme dyslexia, and I saw the frustration that he went through and the teacher's frustration and not knowing how to deal with it, and the emotional trauma that caused him
Yeah.
for his whole entire life. And then I have nephews that are dyslexic,
Mhm.
and just the importance of working with them
Mhm.
and not treating them like something's wrong with them.
Right.
Like teachers don't know how to deal with it, so they get frustrated giving the kid a complex because the child feels insecure about not being able to learn like everybody else.
Mhm.
So I've seen that struggle.
Mhm.
We have foster kids, we have adopted kids,
Mhm.
and some of our kids also struggle. So
Okay.
just getting resources and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So, issues with self-esteem and with feeling like you're stupid and with yeah, that whole big story. That whole big story, as well as the hereditary nature of dyslexia. So we have a lot of different angles here, and a lot of different thoughts, and a lot of different experiences. And we could probably stay here for the next 3 days and talk about dyslexia and not cover all of it. So we're going to try to do the best that we can in 2 hours, okay? This is not going to be a sit and get, okay? So I don't like just talking at people. I really like conversation and questions and answers, and I think it makes for a much more interesting time if we can do that, okay? All right, so let's start with tonight, again, the reason that all of you are here on one level, and that is not specifically dyslexia, but what is important in life, okay? What's important in life? And the thing that all of you are expressing is really what's important. Okay, there are a lot of things that are critical in life, but when we're in this stage of parenting or teaching, okay, or a combination of the two, all right, we're looking at one thing that's really important. I don't think we have a more important job in all of life than raising children. I don't think that there's a more important job. The next generation, they're the ones who run things, all right? And are they capable of doing that? Anybody have any idea of how many people in this country are dyslexic? Anybody, any guesses on how?
Like 1 in 6 or 1 in 4 or something like that.
Okay, you're right there. So about 1 in 5 people are dyslexic. And that's not just in America, that's worldwide, okay? Doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter your nationality, doesn't matter your race. It's about 1 in 5 people are dyslexic. About 70 million Americans are dyslexic, okay? 70 million people who struggle with communication, all right? 70 million people who are very misunderstood, not just by the general public, but even by the educational system. And it's no fault of the educational system. It's not like teachers are doing something wrong or administrators are doing something wrong. You can only help to the extent that you understand. And if you've not been taught, how can you understand? You really can't. And if you don't understand, you really can't help. But we got 70 million Americans. Any estimates, guesses, thoughts on about what percentage of our prison population is dyslexic?
90%.
90%? It's a little bit less than that. I think it's estimated at about 70% is dyslexic. Why are they there?
Because they were never given the tools that they needed to be successful, or it's a self-esteem issue, and went down that path.
Yeah, and the big words, 2 words, self-esteem. Okay? These are intelligent people. Dyslexic people are not unintelligent. Okay? They are intelligent people. And young men and young women, they respond in different ways in the classroom to dyslexia. But you know what? You're a 5-year-old little boy or little girl, and mom and dad put you on the big yellow bus, or they drop you off at the school, and everybody has high expectations when that happens, right? We're off to school, and there's no reason why my little guy or little girl shouldn't do just fine in school. There's no reason for that. But generally, and right here, about the age of 7 is when we really start noticing things, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that we can't notice things earlier than that, but 7's kind of the age when we really start asking questions. Because in kindergarten, kids are kind of picking up reading like this pretty rapidly, okay? First grade, this continues where a good percentage of the classroom is really taking off with reading. And generally what we hear, and again, it's no fault, we must get this out of our minds, and I'm not wanting to put anything in our minds about a difficulty with teachers or any fault on the part of teachers, but generally that there's this thought that they're going to be okay. They'll be okay, they'll catch on, we'll get going here. But you know what? By second grade, we kind of start to doubt that. As parents or grandparents, we kind of start to think, maybe this isn't going to be okay. Okay? And our kids, dyslexic kids, they are kids that cause this disconnect with us. Okay? No disrespect on any level here, but if we have a child who has some real mental handicap, okay, and I'm not even sure if that's proper language anymore, but if we have a child who has really some significant difficulties mentally, we aren't shocked when they struggle with reading and writing. That doesn't surprise us, okay? But these little dyslexic kids, they're not really exhibiting any unusual difficulties when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. There are some things that they can exhibit, but generally, they seem like normal little kids. Okay? And we send them off to school with high expectations. But we've got this bright little kid who very unexpectedly begins to struggle with reading and writing and spelling. And it causes us to twitch a little bit because what's going on here? This doesn't make sense to me. And it shouldn't make sense, right? They're intelligent. And intelligent people don't struggle with reading and writing, okay? But they begin to struggle, all right? Well, back to this whole thought of self-esteem, they're bright kids and they begin to notice right away. Nobody has to tell them that something is different with me than with these other kids. And you know what? Kids aren't standing up in class and saying, hey, I just would like you all to know I'm really struggling with reading and writing. And can I get some help over here? Kids don't do that. They become embarrassed. And they kind of want to hide and kind of want to move out of the limelight, okay? Well, if they did stand up and say, hey, you know, I'm kind of really struggling with this, which they're not going to, they would learn that 4 or 5 other kids in class are doing the same thing, is what they would learn, that they're not all alone, that this is a common thing, okay? Again, dyslexia, mild to profound, and everything in between. So some kids will struggle more than other kids. But what begins to happen, back to this thought of self-esteem, is little boys, little girls, they're going to respond differently, generally, okay? So the years are going by. Little girls, they begin to sit back there as far away as they can, and they slouch down in their chairs behind the person that's in front of them, hoping to just not draw attention to themselves, okay? Little boys, they start to become the class clown. You know, and it's a distraction. It's a distraction. If I can be funny enough, then there's reasons for my bad grades, there's reasons for my bad writing, and I'm just kind of be the funny guy and just kind of, everybody's going to laugh and I can kind of get away with this, you know. And then there's the other group of boys who become rebels. Because, you know, I'm tired of feeling stupid. I'm tired of being the one with all the red ink on my paper day after day. I'm tired of 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, year after year, people with good intentions trying to help me, but nothing's changing. And you know what? They're not hanging out with the eggheads. They start hanging out with other kids who are struggling and with other kids who are tired of being, or who are embarrassed, and maybe for other reasons. And very, very, very sadly, these intelligent kids become rebels. And these intelligent kids, many of them become incarcerated. And it's not because that they were just innately a terrible person, but it's this self-esteem issue back here. They're embarrassed and it turns into anger. 40% of dyslexic kids drop out of school by their junior year. 40% of 70 million. Okay, that's 28 million people who have dropped out of school by their junior year. All right, and the ramifications of that are huge. The ramifications are immeasurable. Okay, not only is it people that are incarcerated who should have never been on that path, there's the financial cost of that. Okay, not only is there a financial cost on the negative side, but those are people who could have been real contributing citizens, who could have been really adding to what's happening in our country on many levels. Okay? And then it's generational. It becomes a heritage almost, because dyslexic people have dyslexic children. Rate of 50%. If mom or dad is dyslexic, half of the kids are going to be. Okay? Highly, highly genetic. And then it just perpetuates itself. And it just perpetuates itself. And breaking that cycle is so incredibly important. You all are here tonight because somebody in your life is struggling. And maybe you struggled, or maybe your husband struggled, or maybe your significant other struggled, or whatever it is, but somebody struggled. Somebody passed this gene on down the line. Okay? And tonight, the importance of being here is really not measurable. It's really not measurable. We can help dyslexic children. And I don't mean me, but I mean us. We can help dyslexic kids. We can. And it's the most important thing you'll ever do in your life. It is. Because it breaks a cycle. Number one, that child is important. And you know what? We only get to live this life one time. That's all we get. You only get one time to be young. Why is a young person young? Why does a young person have parents? Not rhetorical. I'm sorry? To teach them. Childhood is a wonderful time. Okay, it is a time of wonder and of excitement and of curiosity and of discovery. Okay? It's also a time of preparation. It is most importantly a time of preparation. We want this young lady right here to have a full life. And we want it to be full of curiosity and of wonder and of excitement and of exploration and of discovery. Okay? And as she's going through that, to be being prepared for all sorts of things. To be an adult generally, to be successful in life, to be able to contribute to society and to contribute to others, a life of enjoyment and of fulfillment, of satisfaction. Okay? That's what we desire. And you know what? It's, again, the most important thing that we will do with our lives. It is the most important. Preparing children. It's the most important thing. Okay? So how do we do that? Well, there's a second word, and this is a big word. This is a really, really big word for every single one of us. And it's not a very fun word. Okay, it's not an entertaining word. It's not a warm, cozy word. The word is sacrifice. There is nothing easy about breaking this cycle. Nothing. It is going to require sacrifice if you're going to be successful. And there's no other way about it. Okay? We can hope that the schools are going to come rescue us, but they're not going to. And it's not because they don't want to. It's not because that they've got a bad attitude and don't want to help dyslexic people. That's not it. We have a teacher sitting here. You've got 15 or 20 or 25 students, or you're a middle school teacher, or you're a high school teacher, and you've got 150 students. What if you have 150 students, you're a math teacher, and every day you get 150 assignments handed in? How much time can you even spend grading papers? I mean, seriously. If you spend 1 minute per paper, you've got 2.5 hours. If you spend 2 minutes per paper, you got 5 hours grading papers. You can't do that. You can't. It's not a teacher does not have it within their ability to solve this problem, just logistically. It is, you know what? I do not like this saying, it takes a village, but you know what? It does. It does. It takes parents, it takes grandparents, it takes teachers, it takes schools, it takes an administration, it takes maybe a tutor. It takes a lot of people investing into a student's life. 504s and IEPs are nice, but what do? I mean, ultimately, it just makes it easier for a student to get something done in the classroom, is what it does, but it doesn't solve the problem. Solving the problem is teaching a young person to read and write. That's solving the problem, okay? And that's not easy. That's not an easy thing. I am very, very, very strange in the world of dyslexia. Maybe I'm not, and I'm afraid that I'm going to get in big trouble over this someday, but I don't really believe that there's a lot wrong with a dyslexic person. Okay? In fact, in working with dyslexic kids for the past 23 years, I kind of think that they're the normal ones. Okay? In the world of learning, I kind of think they're the normal ones. How many here are musicians? Is there anybody here that's a musician? Okay, we have a musician. What do you play?
Oboe and piano.
You play the oboe and the piano.
Sax and a little piano.
And the saxophone and what?
A little piano.
And a little piano. Okay. All right. All right. Oboe, piano, saxophone, piano. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all, did you become great pianists in a year? No. Okay. Are you a great pianist? And you don't have to brag. It's okay if you are. You can brag. You can say, yeah, I'm a good pianist.
Depends on what playing I need to do, but
Okay.
I can manage.
Okay, how about back here on the saxophone?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely not. Okay. All right. What does it take to become a great musician? Anybody can answer this. How much? You want to be a concert pianist.
Thousands of hours.
Thousands of hours. Okay. All right. How about mathematicians? Is there anybody here that's just like phenomenal with mathematics? Okay. Somebody's being humble here. Somebody raise your hand and say, I am really good. I've gone through 3 levels of calculus and differential equations. Is there anybody out here? Okay. How about physics, science? Education is tough. Learning is difficult. Okay? If you're going to be good at anything, you're going to sweat. What's the term? Blood, sweat, and tears, or whatever it is, right? You know what? Learning something and becoming excellent at it is difficult. Anything in life. Do you know learning to use a spoon was difficult? I don't remember that. But we've all taught somebody to use a spoon probably. They're sitting there in the high chair, they're a year old, and we're just dipping it into that little jar. They use the squeeze tubes now. When I was a kid, it was like the jar, right? And they're dipping it in the jar, and they're putting it in your mouth, and you dip it in the jar, and you put it in their mouth, and you dip it in the jar. And at some point in time, you take the little child's hand, and you wrap it around the spoon, and you start helping them, right? And then at some point in time, you let loose of the spoon, and it's all over their face, and it's all over their bib. But after a couple years of this, most of it's going in the mouth, okay? And after several years, you go, well, let me feed you. And your 4-year-old goes, I've got this, Mom, or I've got this, Dad. You don't have to do that anymore. But just becoming proficient with a spoon took a lot of work. Is there anybody here that's not dyslexic? Great. Tell me what it was like for you to learn to read.
I don't even remember it.
You don't remember it.
It was easy for me.
I'm sorry?
It was easy for me.
It was easy.
And it was only because I had parents who took the time to read to me every night and invest in me and buy books for me from birth. And so I was given that attention and investment.
Yep. Okay. All right. For the non-dyslexic person, learning to read is the equivalent of taking a baby duck that's never seen a pond and you threw it in the pond and it drowned. No. It doesn't matter if that baby duck ever saw water in its life other than maybe water that it received out of a dropper. It's going to swim. That's what it's going to do. And you know, it will never remember learning to swim. And you know what? As a non-dyslexic person, you probably don't really remember learning to read. Okay?
I remember a lot of people.
Well, there you go.
There was rhymes that.
There you go.
Because there's some of them that I still even know to this day because we learned letters to words.
Sure. Yeah.
Poems and
Yeah.
effects and-
But for me, and this is maybe you and other non-dyslexics, I don't know. I mean, I remember kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, and I remember the letter strips on the walls and those things. You know, I remember that. But you know what? I just was one day in our family room and I was laying there on the floor reading a book. I remember that. How that happened, I can't really tell you how that happened. A dyslexic person will never forget it. They will never forget learning to read or trying to learn to read because it was traumatic. All right, and there was a lot of embarrassment involved, and you know what? They probably still are not a good reader today. Probably not. Well, you know, I'm not going to contend, but I'm going to suggest that that's normal. Okay? I'm going to suggest that that's normal because you know, the more significant the skill that we are trying to attain to, the harder it is to learn. And that's true of everything in life. Using a spoon, it's true for. We didn't just pick up a spoon and say, got this, and everything's in your mouth perfect and clean and wonderful. No, that's not the way it worked. The most simple things in life can be difficult to learn. Okay, when we learn anything, there's 5 components to mastery of anything in life. 5 components. And you have to have all 5 of them. If you're missing one of them, you will not master it. The first component to mastery of anything in life is desire. You have to want to do it. If you do not want to do it, you will not master it. Second component for mastery of anything in life is you must have an instructor. You don't have an instructor, nobody to teach you. It might be YouTube. Maybe YouTube's your instructor. But somebody or something has to teach you. Third component for mastery of anything in life, you must have consistency. Oh, I might go to my piano lesson this week. Maybe I won't. I don't know. We'll see. I missed for a month. We'll be okay. No, you're not going to be a good pianist. You must be consistent. Fourth component for mastery, you must have sequential, logical presentation of the subject matter. The subject matter must be presented in a sequential way. We're going to become mathematicians. And today we're starting with algebra. No, that's not the right sequence. If we start with algebra, we are guaranteed failure. Sequentially, we must start with 1 plus 1. And you know what? Starting with 1 plus 1, we're even going to have to teach what the meaning of the word plus is. We're going to have to teach what the meaning of the word addition is. We must start at the very beginning. And then we're going to grow sequentially. What we're teaching must make sense. It has to be logical. If what we're teaching is random nonsense, we're going to struggle with it. And then the fifth component of mastery of anything in life is excellent practice. You cannot have sloppy practice. You will perform in the exact same way that you practice. And if you are missing any one of those 5 components, you will fail. You must have all 5. And that's true for everything that we do in life. Everything. Except for one thing. And that one thing is what? Reading. 80% of our population does not go through that to learn to read. In the world of reading, that's the most common way to become a good reader. I just kind of get introduced to it and I'm off to the races. Okay? That's the most common way to become a good reader. In the world of learning, that's very unusual. In fact, it's a complete anomaly in the world of learning. We don't do that with anything else. We didn't do it with learning to roll over on the ground when we were babies. We didn't do it with learning to sit. We didn't do it with learning to hold a spoon. We didn't do it with anything except reading. And yet we look at the dyslexic kid who struggles and we scratch our heads and go, what's wrong with this kid? I don't think there's a lot wrong with the kid. I think they're normal. I think it's how we teach them. In fact, I know it's how we teach them. I know that for a fact. It's how we teach them. Okay? It's the fourth component. It's the logical sequential presentation of the subject matter. That's where we fall down. Okay? And I guess we can fall down in a number of areas, honestly. Okay? The classroom is designed for the non-dyslexic person. That's what it's designed for. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because 80% of the kids in that classroom are not dyslexic. All right? But even though it makes sense, it doesn't mean that we're not going to send a bunch of kids through the meat grinder. And we do. We send a ton of kids through the meat grinder. Okay? Because we just are not equipped to help that 20%. Logical, sequential presentation of the subject matter. If we're gonna help a dyslexic person, we gotta decide what's important. We have to. If we don't make a decision as to what's important, they're not gonna be helped. And then there's the second thing that we talked about right at the beginning. We have to be willing to sacrifice. If we don't sacrifice, they're not going to be helped. And it is going to be sacrifice. Okay? Decide what's important and then be willing to sacrifice for it. Okay? These kids' lives, you can see dramatic difference. 2 to 3 years is what it takes for dramatic difference in their lives. But you know what? There's other things that are going to have to wait during that time. Because it takes this consistency. It takes consistent instruction and excellent practice. Do you know what? It's the most important thing we'll teach a kid. But how are we spending our time? How do we spend our time? Reading and writing is the most important thing. It is the number one predictor of general success in society. The number one predictor above everything else. So if it's the number one predictor of whether my kid's going to be successful or not, how am I going to spend my time? Am I going to spend it, are we going to spend it gaming? Are we going to spend it in athletics? Is my kid honestly going to make a living in athletics? Probably not. I mean, maybe a coach. Could be a coach. Maybe an athletic trainer. Maybe go to college and become an athletic trainer. But you know, the odds of any kid becoming a professional athlete are not good. You know what? They polled American high school students, and like 85% wanted to be one of two things when they grow up: a rock star or a professional athlete. Well, I'm sorry, but 85% of the population can't be professional athletes and rock stars. Otherwise, nobody will be watching. You can't make a living, you know? Side note. Reading is the number one thing. And you know what? It's the number one thing. I mean, it's obvious, right? You know, I can't be good at math if I can't read. I can't be good at history if I can't read. I can't be good at science if I can't read. I can't be good at literature if I can't read. And just the list goes on and on and on and on and on. I can't really be good at anything if I can't read. I am going to be doomed to something very menial. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to have menial things done. It doesn't mean that. But you know what the human mind is capable of? I mean, we do, right? We know what this thing in our heads are capable of. I don't care your gender. I don't care the color of your skin. It makes no difference. The mind is capable of unbelievable things. It is the mind that changes the world. And it begins with reading. It begins with the ability to access information. It begins with the ability to communicate. Isn't that crazy? Just being able to communicate is the number one predictor of how I will do in life. And it takes sacrifice for our kids. If you're here tonight, if you want to make a difference in a kid's life, it will take sacrifice. And if you're not willing to sacrifice, game over. It must take, what is our priority? This is my number one priority. Then how am I going to spend my time? And that's really the question for all of us. We can teach dyslexic kids to read and write. It's the fourth piece of the puzzle. It's the sequential logical presentation of the subject matter. We can do that. There's a gentleman by the name of Reed Lyon. You probably have never heard of Reed Lyon. Reed Lyon worked for the National Institute of Health back in 1990-ish. Okay? Reed Lyon headed up the children's division of the National Institute of Health. He spoke here in Colorado Springs 10 or 12 years ago, something like that. Okay? And he's talking about teaching dyslexic kids to read. I won't tell you his whole story. If you want to look him up, it's an interesting story. Reed Lyon. He found out that his kid was dyslexic because Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. They went to National Institute of Health and said, hey, would you guys study this whole learning difficulty that kids are having in schools? And Reed Lyon, he was the head of the Children's Division, and they said, yeah, we'd do this study. Well, it was in that study, he didn't even know what dyslexia was at the time, but it was in that study that he learned about dyslexia and learned that his own son was dyslexic. Okay? But he said when he spoke, he said, we could take a hat and we could take sheets of paper and we could cut them up into just little pieces, and on every little piece of paper, we could write down the name of a reading curriculum. Okay? And he said, let's say that there's 1,000 different reading curriculums in the United States, and there probably is, right? And we're going to put all those names of all these curriculums in a hat, and we're going to shake it up and mix it around, and then we're going to take a kid, okay? And this young lady, we're going to take this young lady, and we're going to have her reach into the hat and shuffle it around and draw out one piece of paper. And it's going to have the name of a reading curriculum on it. If you're not dyslexic, it doesn't matter which piece of paper you pull out, you'll learn to read. Makes no difference. Whole language makes no difference. Non-dyslexic people will learn to read. Okay? Not true if you're dyslexic. To varying degrees, right? Dyslexia occurs from mildly, moderately, severely, profoundly. Okay? If you're mildly dyslexic, you may never know that you are. I'm doing a lot more talking than I was supposed to. You may never know that you're dyslexic if you're mildly dyslexic, but you get into moderate dyslexia plus, you'll know it. And you'll know it if it's a child, okay? So, but that's not going to work for the dyslexic kid. Because you know what? Everybody has a spin on reading, and we got to sell our product. And so we're going to teach it a little bit differently than everybody else teaches it. You can't do that with a dyslexic kid. You can't. Okay? When we're teaching a dyslexic kid, you cannot teach them to the calendar. What you can't say is okay, by Christmas break, we need to be here. You can't do that. You can't. You got to say, well, at Christmas break, we're going to be where we are. Because when we're teaching a dyslexic kid to read and write, we have to teach to mastery. Okay, we have to say, we'll take the next step forward when we've mastered this. We'll take the next step forward when we've mastered this. All right? The way we teach mathematics is really a bad idea. Really, the way we teach school is a bad idea. Okay, teaching to the calendar. It's efficient, and and you have to do something when you got a classroom of 25 kids. You have to have order, right? But saying that we need to be here by Christmas, it's a bad idea. Saying that you can pass a math class with a D is a really bad idea. Okay, if I pass a math class with anything less than an A, you know what I know? I'm missing information. And when I get to my next level of math class, that next level of math is dependent on this level. And if I'm missing information at this level is going to suffer. And it compounds as we go forward. That's why kids don't become great mathematicians in America. It's because by the time we've got our like third math credit, it's like, I just need to get the heck out of here because I'm going to fail the next math class. You know, we must teach to mastery with our kids. If we teach to mastery, we throw the calendar out the window, but that requires sacrifice because the school can't do that. The school can't throw the calendar out the window. What does that mean? Well, it means that things have to happen outside of the classroom is what it means. Okay? And you know what else it means? It might mean that we need to be content with bad grades in other disciplines for a while. It's, you know what? We went right back to the very beginning. You know what? This is about preparing children for their entire future. This isn't about getting grades at all. Guess what? Guess what? And this would be like, if there was a history teacher in this class, they would like shoot me right now. If I never have a history class for 13 years of school, kindergarten through 12th grade, if I never have a history class, if I never have a literature class, if I never have a science class, if I only had 2 classes for 13 years, if I only worked on communication skills and mathematics for 13 years, that's all that I did. Guess what? At the end of 13 years, I would be a communicator like nobody could imagine. And I would be so good at mathematics, it would blow people's minds. Focused on 2 things for 13 years. And you know what? I could go to college and I could take any science class that they offered and I'd be just fine, even though I had never had science before. You know why? Because every single upper level science class is math-based. And if I'm excellent at mathematics, I got a head shaking here.
And physiology.
Yeah, okay. But you know what, and that's true, that's true. But you know what, I've learned to be a problem solver and I learned to think. And you know what, that being the case, I could do just about anything that I wanted to do. And you know what, every single course in college, I don't care what it is language-based. Every single course. And you know, if I'm an excellent communicator, if I can write papers, if I can read, if I can comprehend, if I can do those things, guess what? Every door's open to me. Every single door's open to me. Okay, but you know what? If we insist on getting A's in history, if we insist on the literature classes, if we insist on the science classes, which we're going to take them, I'm not saying that we're not, we're diluting what is important. We're diluting what is important. If my kid can't read or write and I'm insisting on these other classes, you know what I'm doing? I am stacking the deck against them. Because you know what? So, yeah, I got my math credits, I got my science credits, I got my history credits, I got all those things. But you know how many kids graduate from school every year and can't read or write? And don't want anything to do with upper level education? I mean, we already know that we're losing 40% of them by their junior year. We already know that. The big word tonight is sacrifice. We can teach dyslexic kids to read and write. And we have seen it over and over and over again. But you can go right down the middle and you can divide both sides. There's 2 groups of people. There's those who sacrifice and those who don't. And we can see it. We can see it right away. There's parents who engage, there's families that engage, there's people that engage, and you know what? They're successful. And then there's people who get excited about solutions and they don't engage. And you know what? And they're not successful. And it's no different than any other discipline. It's no different than mathematics or science or anything. If you engage in it, you will be successful with it. You have different aptitudes, okay? Some people have more of an aptitude toward music than others. Some people have more of an aptitude toward mathematics or science than others. There are those aptitudes, okay? But we can be successful. Some kids are going to progress more rapidly than others. That's true. But you know what? That's the one thing that we have seen distinguishes over and over and over again, is that willingness to sacrifice. All right? What is dyslexia? What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is first and foremost, it's neurological. Okay? So dyslexia begins as a brain difference. And this is not a bad thing. This is really a very good thing. Okay? Human brain, left hemisphere, right hemisphere. A non-dyslexic person has 10% more brain mass over here than over here. So a non-dyslexic person, 10% more brain mass here than here. Non-dyslexic. Dyslexic person, equal amounts of brain mass on both sides. Not because they have less over here, but because they have more over here. A dyslexic person has a larger right hemisphere in their brain, to their brain. Okay? Making their left and right hemispheres roughly equal in overall brain mass. They have a lot of horsepower over here. A lot of horsepower over here. Okay? Given the opportunity, they will change the world. Extremely intelligent people who are very misunderstood. Steve Jobs was dyslexic. 1 semester of college. That was it for him. 7 years later, introduced the first Apple computer, changed the world. Okay? And if you want to go home, you've probably all done it. Look up famous dyslexics. There's a list of them as long as your arm. It goes back as far as Leonardo da Vinci. All right? Leonardo da Vinci was dyslexic. How do we know that? I mean, come on. That's a long time ago. Well, in his writing, you see reversals of letters and words frequently, and I think that that's probably what people base that thinking on. But innovative off the charts. Okay, artists, scientists, architects, phenomenal people. Phenomenal people. The problem is again, so often misunderstood. So often misunderstood. And so often discouraged because of their difficulties within the school system. And not just the school system, but just generally. So often misunderstood. Okay, so it begins as neurological, all right? When we read, we use 3 regions of the brain to read, okay? We use what's called the Broca's here, okay? We use what's called the Wernicke's right here and the occipital temporal region or the automatic recall region of the brain. That's where we read, okay? Well, if you do an MRI, a functional MRI on a person reading, those 3 regions of the brain light up like light bulbs if they're a good reader. If they're dyslexic, they may not show anything. They might, but they might have portions of the brain illuminated all over the place randomly. It's not the same for any 2 dyslexic people. They use different regions of the brain, maybe as much as 5 times as much brain mass to try to achieve the same thing. Okay, it's not that they don't have those 3 regions of the brain, but very, very common for them to not use them. Okay, they can be taught to use them. Okay, they can be taught to use them. Those 3 regions of the brain are where good reading takes place, and that can be taught. Dyslexia has 4 ways in which it manifests itself. Okay, so if you're looking at dyslexic people and go, how do you know a person's dyslexic? It manifests itself in 4 ways. The very, very first thing that you look for: do I have an otherwise intelligent person who struggles with communication skills? The ones that make us twitch, the ones that give us that disconnect, like, what's going on here? We got an intelligent person who's struggling. That doesn't make sense to us. Okay, so we have an intelligent person who struggles generally with communication skills, reading, writing, and spelling. All right, that's the first way in which dyslexia manifests itself. Not the first way; it can manifest itself earlier than that, but that's the most common way that we think of dyslexia manifesting itself: difficulties with reading, writing, and spelling. Second way that dyslexia will manifest itself is difficulties with things that have to do with directionality, and that you mentioned B's and D's earlier. Dyslexic people don't see things differently. They can't remember which side the circle goes on. That's all that's going on, okay? Dyslexic people commonly confuse left and right, very, very commonly, all right? It's not because they don't understand that there are different directions, they just can't remember what's left and right, okay? So difficulties with directionality is the second way which dyslexia will manifest itself. Third way that dyslexia manifests itself: dyslexia will manifest itself in difficulties with directionality. Okay, it can be cardinal directions. Okay, it can be like, I should know this like the back of my hand. Directionality. Okay, we'll start with that. Left-right confusion, cardinal directions, getting from point A to point B in the city. How do I get from here to here? I'm okay as long as I take the same route every single time. But get me off that route and I'm lost. Okay, we don't do that anymore with Google Maps. Okay, but directionality is the third way in which dyslexia manifests itself. The last way in which dyslexia will manifest itself is difficulties with things that have to do or that are sequential in nature. Okay, where sequence matters, where order of events matters. Okay, my kid really struggles with long division. They can't remember the order of the steps. The sequence matters. Okay, yes?
I think I missed one of the steps that you said. I have general communication skills, difficulty with directionality, and difficulty with sequence.
Yes, so difficulty with,
That was the difference between 3 and 4, because I think you used directionality twice.
Right.
oh, did I? Okay, so the first, directionality, sequence, my brain is just like going. I do this like all the time. So yeah, so general language, directionality, rote random memorization. Okay, thank you. So it's difficulties with memorizing things that are random in nature. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, rote random memorization, memorizing things that are random in nature. Very, very common for a dyslexic person to have difficulties with memorizing the alphabet. There's no reason for the order of the alphabet. Okay, none whatsoever. A could be last, Z could be first, we could mix up everything else in the middle, and it's still the alphabet. Okay, it's random, it's a random order. So those are the 4 areas in which dyslexia manifests itself. All right, so they don't see things differently. They don't see B's and D's backwards or anything like that. It's just, they just can't remember. Does the circle go on that side, or does the circle go on this side? All right, those are the 4 areas, those are the 4 ways in which dyslexia manifests itself. One of the most significant difficulties that a dyslexic person has is just, again, general lack of understanding of what's going on. That's probably the number one challenge that they have, is that the adults in their life just don't understand, okay? And again, very, very sadly, for most dyslexic people, that's a lifetime of misunderstanding. All right, if we can spot it, which it's really very easy to spot, when you know what you're looking for. If we're willing to restructure things, if we're willing to throw what is traditional and the way we do things, if we're willing to sacrifice that, if we're willing to be different for these kids, if we're willing to approach life differently for these kids, they can be overwhelmingly successful. But the critical thing is the farther they get through their growing up years, the farther they get through school, the more the stigma begins to stick. And the more that they begin to think of themselves that way. And you know what, the only place that a person can go to when I'm 2nd or 3rd or 4th grade, and they're seeing it very clearly by then, is that there's something wrong with me. I'm stupid, I'm dumb. And they say that over and over and over again, okay? And there's just nothing further from the truth. So you know what, that's the big picture. And how much time do we have left? Oh, we have an hour? Oh my gosh. Wow, that's fantastic. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up for questions. Okay, so I've given you the big picture, all right? And now we're going to let people ask specific questions. Yes?
So, my understanding of the statistics of illiteracy is that if children don't learn to read by the time they're in 6th grade, chances are they will not ever learn to read at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, why isn't there sooner diagnoses prior to 6th grade if people are finding out in 8th grade and high school to be able to help you? Is there a particular school or something that we should be asking for, school or school choice that we should be asking for to be able to get this solved before 6th grade, so that we don't have, people who are illiterate and on their way to prison and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So did everybody hear the question? Okay. It's tough because the problem is there's nothing system-wide. It's again, there's little blips of hope here, little blips of hope there, but there's nothing system-wide. Okay, there are 2 schools in town. One's called Orton Academy and one's called Allies, and they're elementary. Okay.
Orton goes up to 8th grade.
I'm sorry?
Orton goes up to 8th grade.
Oh, up to 8th grade. Okay, thank you. All right. And so that is a tough thing. Kids can, statistically, you're right, 6th grade, things begin to go downhill very fast. But the question is, why do things go downhill? All right. And it's because opportunity is fading rapidly is the primary reason that things go downhill. The further I get through my education, right, what's happening, the busier I get, the more that is asked of me, and the less opportunity I have to focus on the thing that needs to be focused on. Okay, so a 6th grader, a 7th grader, 8th grader, they can all learn to read, but the demands on their life are growing so rapidly that the opportunity fades very rapidly is the big thing. But yes, by all means, if we can catch kids early, the odds of success are much greater. Yes.
Is there something that we should, as parents, should be asking for in elementary if there's even a suspicion, or if we have generations of dyslexia and there is no suspicion, but how can we advocate for our elementary school children?
Okay. Another good question, and unfortunately, I have an answer for you, but it's not a beautiful answer. Okay. The primary thing that schools offer today are IEPs and 504s. That's the primary thing that schools offer today. Those are hard to get. Okay. You might be able to get a 504. To get a 504 and IEP, you have to prove, the school makes you prove it. Okay.
Well, an IEP, you have to be 2 years academically behind.
Yeah.
Whereas a 504 now, if you have, I know, because I'm a teacher too, and so I see it every day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easier to put a 504 into place than it is an IEP. And dyslexia just became known in the state of Colorado as a learning disability like 5 or 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're way behind in that area compared to like Texas. And I refer to Texas just because I follow what they do with their dyslexic kids. And so I think that that's part of the issue though too, is I don't think teachers are educated enough to help support that or to guide that direction. And really the only place to get diagnosed with it is through the Children's Literacy Center or one of the hospitals in Denver.
So it's not taught like if you're going to school for elementary education, there's nothing, even if you're going to be a special education teacher?
I never went through an actual like phonics course or this is how you teach reading.
Wow, really?
Yes, and that's why my son has dyslexia, and I fought tooth and nail and didn't put a diagnosis on him until 5th grade because he suffered from a lot of trauma too. But that's why as a parent and as an adult and as a teacher, it's become a passion of mine, and I got my master's in reading just for that reason. And so, because I feel that if kids don't have a strong foundation by 3rd grade, then we have a big problem on our hands. And so yeah. But that's elementary background for you. So, and I think that that's why it's hard for teachers, because you send your kid to school expecting them to know and get X, Y, and Z. But if they're a brand new teacher walking in the door, they're handed 3 manuals and pretty much told, hey, good luck, here's what you need to teach. And that's how it goes. Whereas in college, you learn how to create your own lessons and your own units and all these things, but you're not taught how to do the phonics piece of it, or how to teach that beginning reading and the importance of letters and sounds and digraphs and diphthongs and all those things that are beneficial to reading.
Yeah. And that's.
Started suspecting my son. I did a lot of research and I was looking at the medical aspect of it. I took him to a doctor and got a referral. Medicaid does pay for another place here called Brain Alliance, and they do dyslexic, autism testing, all of that. So you can get a referral through the doctor.
It's what, Learning Alliance?
But here's.
Brain Alliance helps, so I can.
Here's the really big thing, though, and it's something important for everybody to know, is you don't need a diagnosis to get help in the schools. Okay, it's,
Once you have
yeah.
that medical documentation, they can.
I'm just saying they can't require it. So.
Well, no, they can't require it, but
Yeah.
it does put you
Yeah.
5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, if they're just on the
Yeah.
borderline of needing reading intervention, intervention, they might not get that reading intervention because they're doing enough just
to survive. And
Survive.
it's that gray area. But here's the deal. You can have a diagnosis and the school can come back and say your student's doing just fine. They're doing too well to get help. Or you could, but if you don't have a diagnosis and your kid's really struggling, you can still show without a diagnosis, my kid is struggling and needs help, and they have to give it. Okay, now you can tell me to the extent to which it can be given, but but anyhow, that's just an important thing to know generally, though. Generally, okay. So thank you very much for clarifying that. Yeah. So important. Were you gonna say something else?
No.
Okay, good. So.
I didn't mean to take over, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that. No, I completely appreciate that. My wife is also a teacher, and she says the same thing, never any teaching whatsoever on dyslexia. In fact, she goes back to her early years in the classroom going, why are these kids struggling? Why are these kids struggling? I don't understand why these kids are struggling. And my wife as a school teacher still thought the whole reversals thing was how they saw it, and this was years ago. But anyhow, thank you very, very much for clarifying and for your help on that. But I will say this again for all of you, your best bet is you. It is. Your best bet is you. Yes.
What if you're not the best person to be trying to teach?
Well,
I get so impatient sometimes.
Well-
I just have to walk away.
mhm.
Because it looks like it's not you, it's me.
Mhm.
Just let me go take a break.
Mhm.
But it makes him, I think, more frustrated and hurts his.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, again, I will say before we move to that, your best bet, your child's best bet is you, okay? Because if a student can receive one-on-one instruction, it's going to be much better than group instruction. With dyslexia, again, you're going to have mild, moderate, severe, profound. Okay, and when you put a group of kids together, are everybody in that group moderate? Or everybody in that group mild? Or is everybody in that group severe? Where is everybody in the group? And if they don't match up well, some kids are going to be waiting while other kids we're teaching to this level, or we're teaching to these kids up here, and these kids are being dragged along. Okay, best bet is one-on-one instruction. Okay, we see it over and over and over again, and kids will be successful. We have tons of parents that work with their children. All right, and it's a high calling. We have grandparents that work with their kids. All right. And they are successful. But the point is, and again, it's not a black mark on the schools. We're not here to make schools look bad. Because, I understand if I was in a classroom and I had either just 25 kids all day, every day, or I was in middle school or high school and I had 150, 170 kids every single day, I can't do very much. I just can't. All right? Schools are strapped for help. All right? Even with the best intent, and we have teachers out there with fantastic intent. We still have teachers out there who will say it doesn't exist. I mean, I just talked to a woman from Wisconsin, and their school, they deny the existence of dyslexia in their school still, which is just like unbelievable. But it still exists. So we have lots of teachers and administrators who care, but they can only do so much. It's just realistically, practically, you can only do so much. All right. So parents can teach their kids to read. You don't have to have your master's in reading to teach a kid to read. You don't. All right? And it's what we do every day is we help parents learn how to teach their kids. And kids are successful. If you can't do it yourself, which is by far the best, the other option is a tutor. And then it gets expensive when you do that. Okay? It does. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sorry?
Do you still tutor? It says you did the tutor.
We have tutors that work for us, okay? So when my wife and I started, I will just tell you very, very briefly our story. My wife's a school teacher, and I'll try to make this really, really short. We had 2 dyslexic kids of our own, okay? And she was teaching it through a virtual school, an online school, and she always, back years ago, back in 1990, 91, 92, she had kids in the classroom, physical classroom, and she always had this little group of kids that struggled. And my wife is tenacious, and she's just going, what is going on here? And we had children of our own. We had 2 dyslexic kids struggling, and she just starts researching voraciously. She went to Purdue University. She went to University of Northern Colorado for her teaching certification. but never heard a word about dyslexia. And so here she is with a supposedly excellent education, and she's just scratching her head going, what is going on with these kids? And so she starts researching voraciously. And she goes, the more she researched, she goes, this must be dyslexia. This has got to be dyslexia. So then she started researching curriculums. And she's making phone calls and talking to people and traveling and interviewing people and saying, well, what do we use? What do we use to help with these kids? Well, she chose one. And then that year, she had about 5 or 6 kids in her class that were really, really struggling. She had 40 kids as a virtual online classroom, and she had 5 or 6 that she knew for sure were really struggling. So she contacted the parents and she said, hey, would you all be willing to bring your kids in after hours? She would reserve a class. She would reserve the community room at the fire department, like just a few blocks from our house. And she said, would you be willing to bring your kids in the evenings and let me just work with them on my own time and see what we can do? She did this for a year. And at the end of that year, all of these kids made significant breakthroughs. And at the end of that year, she went to her supervisor and she said, hey, this is what I did all year long. Look at these kids, look at what's going on. Her supervisor went to a regional director, and that next year they said, would you take this school-wide? It was a statewide school. And the first year she had 300 kids in the program. She had parents crying because they tried everything, and they were just running into dead end after dead end after dead end. Well, three administrations later, the school headed off down another path, and Lisa's going, what? What do you mean? We're helping these kids. Why are we changing directions? I don't understand this. So I'm making a long story very short. And she said, I just can't do this. I can't stay here with answers for families and not be allowed to help them. And so that's when we said, well, hey, if let's go out on our own. So when we went out on our own, we couldn't just say, well, we can offer this for free. The school had tax dollars and they could offer it to the kids and the families for free. But we said, what we can do is we can train parents to work with kids. And we can do that for a lot less than tutors, than getting a tutor. And that was our flagship. That's where we got started, is teaching parents to work with their kids. And then we'd have people who would come along and say, hey, we really want a tutor. So that's when we started providing tutors. But our flagship, and still is today, is teaching parents to work with their children, because it is a kid's best bet. With a tutor, you can go once or twice a week, but you still have a homework component. You still must do homework. You can't just go to tutoring once or twice a week and then not go home and practice. It's like going to a piano lesson and going home and not practicing. You got to practice, okay? But if you're doing this from your house, if you're a parent or a grandparent, and we do have plenty of grandparents working with kids, and you do this from your home, you can give some every single day. And you begin to really understand how a dyslexic person learns. You begin to understand it. And you become a phenomenal advocate. And your kids, we see kids just absolutely fall in love with mom. We see new relationships because, my mom taught me to do something that nobody else was teaching me to do. My mom helped me accomplish something that nobody else was helping me accomplish. And it's really, really a neat thing. And it is not the wave of a magic wand. It's not. Okay, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes sacrifice. Yes?
So I've been told, I have only heard of, not totally familiar with the Barton method.
Mm-hmm.
Heard great things about it
Mm-hmm.
over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm assuming by what I'm told is that some of my students are not allowed to read outside
Mm-hmm.
of
Yes.
what they're working on for the whole time or for a period of time?
It's for a period of time.
Okay,
Okay.
and I'm imagining that's rewiring the brain,
Yeah.
not getting those wires crossed and mixed up with.
Yeah,
Okay.
so let me tell you why that is, okay? So the question is why do we not want kids reading out of dyslexia instruction for a pretty decent period of time? And this is why when a dyslexic person reads, and they do read, all of them read to a degree, okay? But they use 4 tools. First tool that a dyslexic person will use is they will do some real reading. There will be some real reading, okay? To varying degrees again. Second tool that a dyslexic person will use is they're going to use some guessing, all right? Just good old-fashioned guessing. They're going to do some reading based on context. The context suggests that this is a pony. It's something pulling a cart. Okay? They're going to do some reading based on context. And then they're going to do a lot of reading based on visual memory. Okay? Dyslexic people, again, are very right-brained. A lot of horsepower over here on the right. That's the creative, visual, kinesthetic side of the brain. All right? And so what a dyslexic person does with a lot of words is they say, teacher or mom, what's this word? And we just tell them. We don't help them sound it out. We just tell them what the word is. You know what they do? They take a mental picture of it. And so now every time they see that word, oh, it says this. They're not going through the phonemes within the word and figuring out what it says. It's like a picture to them. So those are the 4 tools that a dyslexic person uses for reading. Well, we only want to use one tool. We want to decode words. We want to really read is what we want to do. Well, analogy. I want to become really good with my left hand. I'm right-handed, man. I can't do very much with this hand very well. I can hold things and stuff, but I want to become really good with my left hand. So this morning I wake up and I purpose that I'm going to become left-hand. I'm going to get to where I can use my left hand well. So I start off and I'm doing whatever, but you know what? About a half hour into it, I'm using my right hand. I'm back to it. I'm using my right hand. Okay? All right? If I want to become really good with my left hand, you know what I need to do? I need to restrict this hand for a period of time to where this is my only choice. This is my only choice. And so I'll tie my right hand behind my back for 6 or 8 months. And I don't have another option. And I get used to using this hand. Well, when I get used to using this hand, then I can let this hand go again. Okay? Because now I've acquired the skills. And that's what we're doing with dyslexic people. We don't want them just reading whatever now. Okay? Because what they'll do is they'll revert. They'll go back to using their old tools. Okay, and something really scary happens with dyslexic people when we begin working with them. Usually their first couple of dibble tests drop, and everybody really, really loses it, okay? We tried this and everything's going worse, We love that. Because you know what it shows us? It shows us that they're using their new tools that they're not very good with. Okay, if they were still using their old tools, we would still be kind of on the same trajectory, improving a little bit, and nothing would change very much. We love it when we see those scores drop because that means, hey, we're getting the new toolbox out. We're not very good with the tools yet, but we're using them, okay? So that's a good thing. But there'll be a bounce. There'll be a drop, and then we'll begin to grow. Okay. So that's why we restrict reading. And again, what we do is we're not reading Nazis. We don't tell somebody you cannot do this. The family must make that decision. Okay. We'll tell you the rationale behind the decision. Some kids, though they're doing a ton of guessing and they're doing a ton of reading based on visual memory and stuff, they'll bury themselves in books, even though a lot of it's not real reading. Okay, but the kids, man, you would think that you just did something horrible to them by taking that away. And sometimes the cure can be worse than the disease. And so if taking that away does more damage than good, parents need to make that decision. But it will, if we don't restrict outside reading, it does make the process take longer though. Yeah.
When you say outside reading, like with Frank being in school, and then if he has a certain reading program he's supposed to be doing for his dyslexia, how do those blend?
Okay, so thank you. So in a perfect world, we don't live in a perfect world. I'll tell you what we do in a perfect world, though. In a perfect world, our kids would not participate in language arts within the school. You're going to be in the classroom. You're going to be in the classroom, but that instruction is not helping them. Okay, it hasn't to date. It never will help them. All right. And again, it's not that it's bad instruction. For 80% of the kids, it's wonderful instruction. Okay, for our dyslexic kids, it's not. So in an ideal world, we're not going to participate in those language arts. In an ideal world, if we're assigned reading, we're going to listen to it. Okay. In an ideal world, somebody can read to me, or we can listen to books on audio, or in an ideal world, somebody's going to read the instructions to me. Okay. We go as far as in an ideal world, somebody will scribe for me initially. Okay. So we'll give you the ideals. All right, we'll give you the ideals, and then again, people need to make those decisions. But again, yeah, That's that. We give you a best case scenario. This is like in a perfect world what we would do, and then we got to see what we can, what are we going to come away with? How many of those perfect presents do we get to keep?
So pretty much I have to try to work with the teacher and see if we can integrate.
And that's where 504s and IEPs and all of that fun stuff come in. Can we make?
He's in a private school.
Okay, yeah.
12
Well,
kids in the room.
yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Much more what do I want to say? Ability to make those decisions. Absolutely. Keep in mind what's important. It's okay if I don't do well on a history test. Those types of things. Reading instruction is critical. Yes.
That was kind of my same question because my son just started high school, so.
Yeah. So this is tough. You're in a really tough place. Okay. So for you, pull out all the stops on technology. Okay, seriously. Okay. Let him listen to everything that he can listen to. All right.
He does have that on his iPad,
Which
but a lot of times he doesn't like to use it.
he doesn't like to use it. Okay. It is. There's a guy by the name of Ben Foss. If you've not heard of Ben Foss, look up Ben Foss. He would encourage you in these areas specifically. He didn't really learn that he was dyslexic till he was in law school. Okay. So same type of situation, advanced education, really struggling. But to this day, I don't think he really practices law today, though he graduated from law school. I think his thing is, I think he's a dyslexia advocate. It's his whole life now. And he, without apology, tells you, I ear read. That's what he says. I ear read.
FOSS?
FOSS, Ben Foss, FOSS. Yeah, and so, and he listens to books at 400 words per minute, and he just absorbs them, And so, but he would be an interesting one to look up, because that's when you get into high school, and that's where back to this whole thought about 6th grade, and if you're not a great reader by then, things are going off the edge of the table, and it's true, because now I'm in high school and I've got tons of work. Tons of homework, and do I have a lot of time just to focus on becoming a good reader? I don't have lots of time for that. I've got piles of homework, and then we've got extracurricular activities, sporting events, and I participate in sports, and kids are getting together and doing this, and all of a sudden, this wonderful window of elementary school is just gone. So it doesn't mean he can't learn to read and write. Well, it doesn't mean that, but the opportunity to do that is just.
He did do take fight.
Okay.
Is that similar? For 2 years, I took him out of school twice a week, and he would do that. He was doing better, but he had some trauma, and he digressed and everything.
Yeah. And see, and it is, and that's, stories like that, it breaks my heart, because you want to be there to help people, and I see where your son is at and where you're at, and there's a lot of trauma associated with this. There is, and another thing that is just so critically important, and it's something that doesn't happen as much as it should, is even though if I'm getting that instruction outside of the school, there needs to be an in-home component. There just has to be an in-home component, and unfortunately, in the world of private instruction, I don't know why, but that's not included a lot of times. And again, and it's as negative as giving a piano lesson again, and just you go home and you don't practice the piano at home. Well, how good are you going to be next week at your next piano lesson? Not very different. You need the in-home component. If you're going to go out, and if you get tutoring, if your tutoring is not offering an in-home component, you need to ask for one, or you need to find somebody who's going to give you that in-home component, because that practice is vital. That's how we build the brain's ability to process information. What school does that, right? If we have history or science or math or whatever it is, we don't just have something in school, in the classroom. The kid takes something home with them, right? I need to practice that at home. You need that in-home component. You really, really do. But, without apology, and you can call if you'd like to. Anybody who would like to contact me, you're welcome to do that. But look up Ben Foss. There are, one thing about dyslexic people are phenomenal problem solvers. They're phenomenal. They're really, really good at creating workarounds, and that's why they changed the world too. They're really, really good at creating workarounds. But boy, I tell you, at this stage of the game, if a person is committed to it, they can do it. But you have to be committed. You have to, yes.
Can you provide your contact information? You said we could call.
Yeah, absolutely. So the name is Rick Weaver. Phone number. Office number is 719-599-5869. And cell number is 719-663-0389.
So basically, the parents or grandparents need to do the training instead of the child for the dyslexia, right?
Instead of
my grandson going and getting trained on how to deal with it, I'm the one that needs to.
Well, I mean, there are, your basic options are, number one, does the school offer something not commonly? It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it's not common, okay? If it's not happening within the school, then your options are you or another private individual, you know?
I don't mind teaching.
Yeah.
I think most of my frustration is I don't understand.
Okay, well, that can be solved. Okay, that can be solved. You can understand, all right? But again, it takes work, all right? And teaching reading is not rocket science. Teaching reading is not calculus. It's not physics, okay? There are real reading skills that are not complex, but it's how we teach them. It's the order in which we teach them, and it's this crazy thing. It's waiting for the student. It's so important when we're working with a dyslexic student that we don't have personal goals. Okay, that we don't say, okay, by the end of today we need to be here. By the end of the week we need to be here. By the end of the month we need to be here. We can't have those goals. Okay, those need to go away because those do a couple of things. They can be really, really negative. They do one primary thing that can be very, very negative. I'm an adult and I can achieve those goals, right? Okay, if my kid can't and I'm pushing, I'm going to cause relational issues. My kid's going to start to push back. Okay, and now we've got relational issues, and now my kid doesn't want to be with me. Maybe it's the neighbor's kid, maybe it's your grandson, maybe it's whoever. But I don't want to be with them because they got frustrated. I got frustrated because you're not meeting my goals. I wanted to be here, and come on, son, just 5 more minutes, and we've got this. Well, you know what? These kids are working so hard mentally. I mean, they got steam coming out of their ears, and they are shot. After a period of time, they're just shot, they're done. And you know what? I tell you what, we tell our parents, your number one goal when you're working with your student, your number one goal, and I don't care what this takes, is that they want to be with you. That's your number one goal. If your kid says, I can't wait to be with mom or dad or grandma or the neighbor, whoever it is, I can't wait to sit down with them. It's always, I love being with them. Okay, we're on the right track. We're on the right track now. Okay, then we're careful. How long do we tutor with that student? How long do we work with them? They determine that. But they don't say that it's time to stop, mom or dad. No, we watch, or grandmother, or whatever, we watch. And when we see their curtains start to drop, we say, I think we're good for today. I think we're good for today, And it might be today, it might be 20 minutes, tomorrow it might be 30 minutes. But it's going to change. It depends on how much emotional energy they've got left, right? How much mental energy that they've got left. So we watch for them to start to check out because we have no idea how hard a dyslexic person is working when they're learning to read. They are exerting a lot of effort, okay? And you know what? If I start to push them beyond their limits, guess what? Our return on investment begins to drop. We're spending the time, but how much are they assimilating? How much are they retaining? It starts to drop as well. Okay, and we don't want to go beyond that point because we're just going to have to repeat stuff. Yes.
I also wanted to recommend, and if it's okay, my son has dyslexia, and we've gone through all the steps of occupational therapy and learning disability, and he was still struggling with the reading. He still is, but this summer, one of the reading tutors that we were seeing recommended an eye exam, which we had done eye exams in the past and everything was fine. He had 20/20 vision. Mm-hmm. But she recommended that a doctor to do like a specific eye exam with the muscles of the eyes. And we did go see her. It took 3 months to get in to see her because she's very but she did also mention that there was some muscle, I guess, weakness in the eye that kind of made his eyes lose that concentration because that's something else with dyslexia. They're reading and they tend to lose the spot that they're at.
He says sometimes they start wiggling.
Yes, there's that.
That's due to what's called scotopic sensitivity. And so, but we can talk about that too. But go
And
ahead.
so we are now doing eye exercises with him
Mhm.
to help with that strengthening.
Yeah.
So we'll go back in 3 months to see how he's doing, but that's another component that we've added.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that, because those are two things. That's one thing, but we're going to make it two that you really want to do with your kids is hearing tests and eye exams. Okay, because if a student does struggle on some level with hearing or vision, it doesn't mean that it's not dyslexia, but it can certainly add a whole new component of struggle to the equation. Okay, yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Okay. Other thoughts or questions?
What was the eye thing?
Oh, scotopic sensitivity. Okay, it's something that we always check for. And scotopic sensitivity is just light sensitivity. Okay, but what can happen is generally we have black print on white paper is generally what we get. Okay, and that's a significant contrast. And if you get under bright lights for extended periods of time, if you have eyes that are extra sensitive to light, you begin to get eye strain. And there is a kind of what I want to say. Well, what happens is you go through this, not a process, but it begins off where your eyes just start getting tired, okay? And then they maybe start watering. And then you start to, because of the brightness, you start squinting. And then you start to get a headache. And then you start to get tired. And when everything kind of culminates and kind of climaxes, the eye strain can become so significant that the words on the paper will actually begin to look like they're moving around. Okay, and that can be, and they can vibrate, they can levitate, they can look like they're spilling off the sides of the paper, they can look like they're spinning, they can look like they're switching places. Okay, and that's called scotopic sensitivity. We always check for that as well, because that can also, again, cause additional significant difficulty with reading. Okay.
He doesn't like bright light. Like
Yeah.
his room, he wants a lamp on, not
Mhm.
the overhead.
And scotopic sensitivity is really easily dealt with. It's just you're sensitive to light is all that it is. And people will do things like wear sunglasses actually indoors while you're reading. They have these things called color overlays, and you can get them on Amazon. And they're just sheets of plastic that come in different colors, different tints. They can be pinks or yellows or greens or blues. And, they're usually pastel light colors. And you lay them over the print, and you read with them over the print. Now, and generally what happens is somebody will find a color that is most comfortable for their eyes. And if somebody wants to get real fancy, you can get a pair of glasses without a prescription that has that color of lens. And then you can put but that I'm not sure the cost of getting something like that. But yes, scotopic sensitivity is something else to keep your antenna up for. Were you going to ask a question? Okay, all right. Yes, yes.
Earlier, I just wanted to correct myself. I was saying it was called Brain Alliance for the test. It's actually called Brain and Body Integration, and it's here in Colorado Springs,
Okay.
and it takes Medicaid and no copay.
They do take meds?
They test for dyslexia, autism, ADD, all that stuff. If you get a referral from your doctor.
And more than likely, you can get it sooner in Denver than you can here if you're willing to drive. Because I think when I originally did it, it was going to be like a 6-month wait here. But in Denver, they got me in within the month because I was willing to drive and they put me on the next availability stuff.
Thanks
Hmm.
for allowing me to know that it is.
Yeah.
If you're willing to drive to Denver, that could be the case for a lot of things.
Okay. Other questions that are left unanswered? Anything?
One more last thing. So when I found out my son was dyslexic, they want him to keep continuing to do Spanish every year, and I had to kind of push for him to not do that. He's already struggling in English. Let's focus on English, like you were saying, cut some of the other
Yeah.
stuff. So that's what we did, and that did help.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that at the high school level? Because like,
foreign language
Mm-hmm.
graduate.
Right.
Like when you're struggling with English, how do you
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. Colleges are really leading high schools pretty significantly in this whole area, but many colleges now are accepting American Sign Language as a foreign language option or credit. And so I think I would definitely ask the high school for that. I would explain, my son's dyslexic. We're struggling enough with the English language without taking on a foreign language. Would you accept American Sign Language as an alternative? And I think you might have some luck with that.
But my grandson's school is teaching that, and he's doing amazing.
Teaching American Sign Language. And that's the other thing is again, dyslexic people tend to be, again, very kinesthetic, very right-brained. So where a sign language would be something that would not be at all uncommon for a dyslexic person to really excel with sign language. So. Yeah, which is a great option. It's a fantastic. Did everybody hear that? Concurrent enrollment through PikeSpeak is a very, very good option. Yes.
When you do training with parents, is it done virtually or in person?
Virtually. Yep. Yep. It sure is. And
Is it, how long is the training, or does it depend on the severity of?
it's continual. It's continual. So we use the Barton reading and spelling system, okay, which I will tell you right now, Susan Barton doesn't entertain anybody. She doesn't entertain the teachers. And she doesn't entertain the students. Okay, and we had the privilege of talking with Susan Barton one time, and we did not ask her this question because it's not a question you would ask. But she was talking about that subject had come up with her about her training, and she said, I looked at them and I said, "You're an adult." She says, "I'm not here to entertain you." She says, "I'm here to teach you how to teach children to read." But I will tell you what, she is a phenomenal instructor. But there's 10 levels to her program, and there's instruction that comes with every single level, okay? And so levels will run anywhere from 5 lessons up to 14 lessons per level, and there's training for every single lesson, all right? And it's very doable. It's very doable, and the methods are very repetitive, and so it's something that you begin to get used to, and you begin to become comfortable with, and it's just, kids are highly successful with it. But yeah, good question. The training is nonstop. So with every lesson, there's new training. Okay.
How similar is it to what you're looking at?
You know, all of them. I think we actually. And I will give the credit to my wife. She actually decided on Barton like 20 years ago, on the Barton reading and spelling system. She did that for a couple of reasons. One reason that she did it is because there's no lesson preparation with it. Okay, so the Barton reading and spelling system is 100% scripted. So you never have to imagine anything. You never have to spend time putting together a lesson plan. What are we going to do tomorrow? It's, you watch her training, and then you present. You watch her training, and then you present, okay? And so that's one reason that Lisa chose the program. Another reason she chose the program is because everything else that she looked at, you had to go get the training someplace, okay? So, for instance, I'm trained in Linda Mood Bell. But to do that, I had to travel, and you shell out the money and you get the hotel and which is fine. But with Barton, you've always got the training, always. With Linda Mood Bell, it's a great program. It helps kids. But I've done it, and so I can talk to it. I can speak to it. But once you go through the training, you're done. Your support through that company is done. You don't get any more support. And so that's another reason Lisa chose Barton, is because the support never ends and the training is always available. You can always go look at it again. So that's another reason she chose it. She chose it again because you don't have to travel for the training. She chose it because it's designed for the non-professional teacher. It's not designed for professionals. It's not that professionals can't use it, but it's designed for parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And we've even had older siblings work with kids. And if you're willing to go through the training, and again, it's not rocket science. You don't have to come away and be able to pass a calculus test, okay? It's teaching real reading skills. It's how they're taught. It's the order in which they're taught. And so even a dyslexic person can teach a dyslexic person using it, okay? There is a tutor screening that you go through, okay? And if you can pass the tutor screening, you can teach it. the big thing again is you must be committed. You really have to be committed. If the commitment piece of the puzzle is not there, you're going to be as successful as you would teaching anything else. Or maybe I should say as unsuccessful as you would be teaching anything else. So that's why we ended up going with the barn. It isn't entertaining. It's not colorful. There's no bells and there's no whistles. But boy, I tell you what, it changes kids' lives if you implement it well. It really does. We have so many stories, but one story that just always sticks in my mind is this little girl. Her mom, three dyslexic girls. And the last little girl, Lily, oh my word. I mean, this is like dyslexia off the charts. But you know, we meet with our parents, we're in constant contact with them as they're going through the program. And little Lily, she repeated levels but you know what? Lily graduated from the program, and at the age of 11 or 12, that little girl could read as good as any adult you've ever sat down and listened to. It was just an unbelievable thing to listen to. But you know what? It was a commitment, and it was a lot of pain and a lot of tears and a lot of suffering. But you know, that little girl's life has changed forever and forever and forever, which is a phenomenal thing. And so I think I said probably a lot more than I need to there. But
So as far as your program goes, is it a general fee? Is it a monthly?
yeah, it's $76 a month. Is what it is. There's no contract. We don't have a contract with anybody. Generally, we screen kids. We've been through Susan Barton's. It used to be a diagnosing course. It can't be a diagnosing course anymore. So we've been through her screening course, and we've been working with kids for 23 years now, and we know dyslexia when we see it. So generally, we screen kids for free. We cannot, again, call it diagnosis. We can't do that. And we have no contract. We don't want anybody with us if they're not being successful. You shouldn't be with us if you're not being successful. But if you're being successful, you're going to stick around, you know. And so that's how we work.
How do parents get the Barton materials?
Through us, we provide all the materials.
For the $76?
Yeah. It's a library loaning system.
It's a flat 76 a month.
$76 a month, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is the name of the company?
Essentials to Success. Yeah. And I did not come here to sell anybody anything. That's not why I'm here. We love helping people. And we have many people who just do nothing but call us with questions, and we're very, very content with that. Okay, if we can help on whatever level, we want to help people. And okay, good. So we need to be wrapping up here. So we have time for if there's any last minute questions. Okay. Trying to think how. Yeah, I think there's nothing more earth-shattering. I think you guys have the big picture. I think you have the basic knowledge, and I will reiterate that you are your child's best bet. You really, really are. For your son, pull out all the stops, and you know, if he's willing to do remediation, he'd have to embrace it. We've got right now we're working with a 15-year-old boy in Texas, via Zoom, and he's doing well. He's doing well. But his mom is committed and he's committed. But it's tough at that age. It just is. But you know what? Again, when you get to a certain point, look up Ben Foss. Everybody look up Ben Foss and others like him who he's figured out how to get things done that need to be done in very unconventional ways. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no cheating in that whatsoever. Okay, we've been given multiple ways in which to communicate. Okay, we don't ever tell a person that's blind it's cheating to use your ears, right? Or it's cheating to use your fingertips. And you know what? We have multiple ways of communicating with people, and they're all valid. You know, do we want somebody to be good readers and writers with their eyes? Yes. Why do we want that? Well, because there's a lot of print out there, and it's a good tool. But there's no shame in becoming really, really good with your ears either, okay? There's no shame in that whatsoever. You'll love Ben Foss. You'll really, really like him. Okay, all right. Always free for questions, and like I say, you're always welcome to call. We'll answer any question that you've got, always available. And I sure appreciate y'all being here tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.